The drink of Vikings. The drink of adventurers and authors. The drink of statesmen. That's today's episode of SEARED. We are going to dive into the ridiculously interesting process of producing great beer. Enzyme kinetics, barrel aging, kettle souring, and pitch rates for yeast. It's all hard science that leads to that oh-so-delicious, easy-drinking golden beverage of kings and peasants alike. Our exploration of beer takes place at Grand Rapids Brewing Company in Grand Rapids, Michigan, home to some of the most refreshing, well-made beer in the Midwest. This is where you want to grab a pint, choose a game in the game room, and chill. Take a look at this, a pig named Reuben. Smoked pulled pork laid atop a pile of freshly sliced corned beef. Sauerkraut and Swiss for that legendary combination of strong, dank flavors. And of course, sliced pickles and ground mustard. The Cuban and the Reuben smashed together into one ridiculously flavorful sandwich. With its reclaimed wood floors, tables, and walls, GRBC is epically utilitarian and uncommonly inventive. Inventive, just like my guest, brewmaster and obsessive tinkerer, Ernie Richards. Ernie unabashedly wields his knowledge of science to meticulously craft some of the most exemplary examples of everyday styles of beer. Within just a few moments of talking to this guy, it's easy to spot his brilliance. Although he's much more likely to tell you how awesome you are, rather than to accept a compliment about himself. With a degree in genomics and molecular genetics, and his beer brewing cohort Bobby Edgecombe, Ernie has designed, tinkered with, then mastered some of the toughest styles of beer to brew. Now you, the listener, grab a pint and pay close attention. Professor Richards, the mad scientist, is about to school all of us in craft beer. I'm Jay Mays, and this is SEARED. Amazing food, remarkable people. Welcome to SEARED.
Thank you.
What are we going to talk about?
We're going to talk about aliens, life after death, maybe a little bit about beer.
Okay. How about we start with the beer?
Let's do that.
All right, you're good with that?
After we have a couple beers, and the conversations about aliens and life after death will naturally flow a lot better.
Perfect.
So.
I like that.
Yeah.
You're speaking to a former Mug Club member of GRBC?
Former?
I know. I'm sorry. I should have renewed.
Come on. Yeah, we're going to change that. We'll talk about that
end
later.
of this interview, I'll re-up. We'll call that good.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you. So the first thing we do on SEARED is order a drink.
All right.
And since you're the aficionado, the master, the alchemist, if you will, I think you should decide. So what do you think?
So, I mean, like I was saying, we would probably want to start out light, kind of ease into things. So one of the beers I drink the most of is Sports Ball Contest Watching Drink, which is basically our light adjunct lager.
Yep.
And that's probably one of that's one that we can start out with because it's super light, crisp, clean, easy to drink, and you know it's fun because who doesn't like light beer? Yeah. Actually, a lot of people don't like light beer.
Sure.
I love light beer, so we decided to make it.
Yeah. Say the name one more time.
Sports Ball Contest Watching Drink.
Sports Ball Contest Watching Drink.
Yeah, because we just left it really, really general and vague because you can enjoy it while watching any sports ball contest of any variety. So it's not a football drink, not a basketball drink.
Right.
It's every sport.
Not a hockey drink?
Well, it doesn't count for hockey because there's not a ball.
I guess that's true. You need a hockey lager now or something.
Yeah, I didn't realize we kind of left that out. Wow.
Next time.
Sports ball
is kind of ubiquitous, right? It means whatever.
Yeah.
All right. We'll do some of that. All right. Let's get one.
Go grab one?
Yeah.
All right.
Sweet.
Should we get coasters? I mean, those napkins are a pain in the ass anyway. They don't do anything to stick to the bottom of the damn cup.
Yeah, unless you have salt or something.
Yeah.
I think this is good.
We're good.
Sports ball contest watching drink. I assume, did you name these?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of times when we name beers and they're just like, they just kind of look at me side-eyed, like, really? Like, that's what I'm like, no, it's a serious thing.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is, one of the reasons why we name things like that, the funny things like that, is because, one, it just gets people in a different frame of mind, you know? Like, when you go to order a beer at a bar, you know, sometimes you've been waiting a while, sometimes you're tense, whatever. Sometimes, like, you know, you're dealing with a server or whatever, you know, and you don't know them and they don't know you, but things like that kind of put people in a different frame of mind, and it kind of makes, you know, it brings out conversation. It kind of makes like the dialogue between like your server and your bartender, or your bartender and customer, or server and the customer, like a little bit more like fun. You know, it's like it puts people out of their comfort zone, because if they say the name, they kind of laugh a little bit, you know, and it's just like, we used to always joke, like when we'd watch sports at like Hopcat, we'd just yell, you know, when I was bartending at Hopcat, we would just generally yell at the screen, "Sports!" So then we made this beer. We're like, this is the perfect sports ball contest watching drink. And then we're like, we just call it sports ball contest watching drink.
It's a great name.
Yeah. So a lot of it is just fun. You know, it's just kind of just to, you know, make a joke with people, kind of bring people into a different frame of mind, you know, when they're talking with their server or talking with their bartender and stuff. So we used to do a lot of weird names like that when I brewed over at Hopcat. And, you know, it was kind of fun because at the time when we first started brewing, I was also bartending at Hopcat. So, you know, I got to see firsthand, you know, like these names in action. And it was fun because, you know, it would start that interaction off with a little bit of a joke. So we've had fun with it. Sometimes they're like, dude, that is fucking stupid.
Right.
Sometimes,
that's the feedback. Once in a while, you get a customer who's like,
no, I mean, on Untapped, we'll see it. On Untapped, we'll see it. Be like, and a lot of times, it's rare that people will be like, this is a stupid name.
Yeah.
More often than not, people will comment and they'll laugh at the name, you know, because we have like right now we have this beer that's called Universal Rainbow Unicorn Princess of the Universe and stuff. Deliberate redundancy, extremely long name, and the managers, sorry guys, they hate it because it messes up their spacing.
Sure. Wait, on the menu?
Yeah.
Is that by intent?
Well, it's kind of like, no, it's not intentional.
Oh, sure.
No, we'd never do that.
We'll cut that.
No, they'll laugh at it. They're like, they probably know, like, you little bastard.
Yeah.
But you know, we have a lot of funny names like that.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
You know, there's so many beer names out there that are so serious, and everything's trying to be like this or that, you know, and it's more fun just to have lighthearted names, you know.
I like that.
It takes away from the overriding seriousness of beer culture. Like, it's beer.
Yeah, it's beer. Well, cheers.
Cheers, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good beer. That's a pretty nice crushable. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I was super stoked when a guy, one of my fellow brewers, he's a former brewer, but he came in and he was actually pretty stoked about that, which is wild because you don't generally hear feedback on this beer from brewers.
Yeah.
And they were stoked about it. I'm like, it means more to me than a lot of other beers that you could have complimented, oddly enough.
Yeah. You did say that crafting this beer, there's tricks to it. It's a little more difficult than crafting something that you can cover up a flavor profile.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's so light, you know, and you know, when we first started brewing lagers, when I first came over here to brew, I was not accustomed to making lagers. When I brewed at Hopcat, we had 3 fermenters, and they're small fermenters. And, you know, we kind of had to keep things rolling a little bit differently. Here we've got like 9 fermenters, and we've got space and we've got time to do it.
Yeah.
And we'd also had, you know, Silver Foam, which is kind of like our flagship lager that we were doing. And then we kind of did a couple other lagers. So, you know, Silver Foam was like, shit, I'm gonna have to get my lager game up, you know. And you know, my friend that had been brewing here before me, that was the head brewer, Jake Brenner. He teaches over at GRCC now. You know, he'd kind of given me his general parameters on it, and so I followed those, and then I started delving into it a little bit more and realized, like, man, it's some difference. It's a different approach, you know. Okay. We've even still now, you know, like I feel like I'm still learning a little bit about how to make them good and make them clean, because there's just weird little isms about, you know, with lager fermentations, they're done cold. It takes longer. You know, the time, you know, for the primary fermentation to complete all the way to the time that you get to conditioning, you know, it's a few weeks, you know, at least 2.5 weeks. And then there's still some stuff that goes on in conditioning, you know, so we really had to like learn how to dial in our pitch rates with the yeast. Is one thing that we've really started doing lately, because we got the equipment to do it and we got the microscope and everything. So we started dialing in the pitch rates really well on them and realized that some of our off flavors are coming from not pitching enough yeast.
Okay.
Little things about our system too. We got some modifications on our kettle that allow us to actually keep the kettle lid closed and make sure all the evaporation goes out, rather than, before we kind of had like a little fan set up. It was like a house fan, and it was super janky, but it's just kind of what we're used to. But because we had a really old burner, and this burner was either on or it was off, and when it was on, it was like strapping a rocket pack on a child. It was a little bit intense. I mean, seriously, this thing was the boil would go so nuts that we had to put this house fan in there to kind of keep that air moving and that that air flowing in the right direction. So. We got a burner that we can dial down now, so we're not trying to send children to space on a stream of bubbling, boiling beer. So we realized that how important that was to getting all the DMSs and off flavor that you'll get if you don't get that evaporation out.
Yep.
The fan, we were just recondensing it on the top of it. And so it always come out tasting a little vegetal and little cream corn. So.
Science break! Whoa, Ernie gave us a ton of information, so let's recap. The pitch rate of yeast refers to how much yeast is added to the wort. The standard unit is million cells per milliliter of wort. The wort is the liquid extracted from the mashing process during brewing. And finally, Ernie mentions a DMS flavor that can occur if your pitch rates are off. DMS is dimethyl sulfide, or methylthiomethane, better known as that smell produced from cooking certain kinds of vegetables, notably corn and cabbage.
It was driving us nuts trying to work some of those things out as we got deeper, and now with this beer, this has been the really good yardstick for that, because it's so stripped down, and now that we've started to get it to the point where it's really, really clean and we're super happy with it, we've got all of our parameters like dialed in. We're like, yes.
It's great.
So that's why I get so excited about it, because I feel like there's this is representative of a lot of like evolution and like and some of the the skills and the practices that we've kind of taken on in the brewery. The other beers it gets lost in, an IPA, we're dry hopping it, 22 pounds, or so in like a 7-barrel batch. And this is not dry hop at all, but little isms in the malt profile, throwing a bunch of hops in there, it doesn't pop as much, So
sure.
This one is like, it's letting us know like, you're doing good. You're doing all right.
You're doing it. Interesting.
Yeah.
So I would say what it sounds like to me is that this takes more specificity and more skill to brew.
Yeah.
And that wasn't your expectation going in.
Yeah, not at all. And I'd known, for the most part that lager brewing was quite a bit different, but I just had never really done it. I knew that it took a lot more time, but when it came down to like the fine details of some of the process and stuff, I was like, oh man, it's a whole different rabbit hole of things. And I like it, and I think that, what we're seeing now with like craft beer is there's becoming more of a like respect for lager brewing. Because, in the years past, until very recently, a lot of times lagers were so synonymous with just macro beer. And just shit beer that, a lot of times people that were considering themselves like craft beer aficionados would just look at a lager.
They'd turn their nose up at it. Yeah, like, I'm not drinking that. Yeah, and a lot of it is just because it was just so synonymous with, craft beer culture and being an aficionado that sentiment was just so ubiquitous amongst craft beer consumers that now you're seeing people really starting to realize that, there's so much more of an art to it, or patience, or just, it's a less forgiving type of beer to brew. So I think it's pretty awesome because, I thoroughly like drinking lagers. We drink a lot of them, and it's like, well, this is a good one.
And this one was one that we struggled with the first few times we made it. We're like, oh God, it's got like little off flavors and stuff like that. And, we're hypercritical. We're the first ones.
You're professionals.
We're the first ones standing in line to kick ourselves in the nuts if something doesn't go exactly right. And as it should be, you know, like if something, you know, somebody points out something that I haven't already like ruminated over, then I'm kind of like, shit.
Yeah.
What am I doing?
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
This to me is the result of being a perennial learner, right? Like constantly working through your craft.
Yeah.
Constantly making it better.
Yeah, you know, when it comes down to stuff like that, yeah, we're not ones to settle at all. You know, we are always looking, and sometimes for better or worse. You know, sometimes there's, you know, that old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah,
but
sure.
It's like
that keeps you in one spot. You follow that adage, you're not going to move, you're not going to evolve.
Yeah.
You're just going to stay in one spot.
Yeah, and you know, for me, I'm an obsessive tinkerer. I'm like, you know, yeah, it can be a little better, you know, and sometimes. There's plenty of instances where I probably should have just left things alone. And
sure.
But with brewing, you know, at least if we have some sort of like scientific based, you know, reasoning, tinkering,
measurement,
then
experimentation, those components.
Then we'll feel better about it, you know. So, but yeah, we constantly are looking at things that we can improve on beer, and you know, and going and reading a lot and trying to absorb as much information as we can, and yeah, that's something that sometimes, you know, keep you up at night.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to read to you a few quotes I found about beer, and some of these you've probably heard, and some of them you haven't. But I think these are special, right? So first off, we're going to start with Shakespeare. For a quart of ale is a dish for a king. Have you heard that?
For a quart of ale is a dish for a king. Yeah.
It appears in the Bible, right? Proverbs. Let beer be for those who are perishing, wine for those who are in anguish. Let them drink and forget their poverty and remember their misery no more.
Until they sober up.
Yeah, that's how they until they sober up. And then poet Henry David Thoreau. Instead, there's two parts of this. It's massively long. But I want to point this out because that's what you're doing. This magic, this alchemy is supporting like these types of cultural nuances, right?
Yeah.
So instead of water, we got here a draft beer, a lumberer's drink, which would acclimate and naturalize a man at once, which would make him see green, and if he slept, dreamed that he heard the wind sough among the pines. You're talking about a 13,000-year-old chemical solution that you guys brew every single day.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
That to me is what is inescapable about beer, is that you can enjoy it with one person at a table like this, or you can have it at a massive party, and it can be peasants or kings.
Yeah.
Why beer? How'd you get started?
Yeah, you know, well, to touch on your last point, I mean, that's exactly a lot of the reason why I like beer is kind of like, you know, has been a thing that I got into because, you know, previous to working at Hopcat where I bartended, and really that's what got me in, like roped me into the whole craft beer world. But, you know, previous to working there, I was working at a place that, you know, it was all wine. And it was a wonderful place. It was like high-end dining and beautiful food, you know, and I got to learn a lot about wine, like more about wine than I probably really, you know, needed to know. But for the job, I needed to know a lot about it, you know, different regions, Côte du Rhône, you know, and all that stuff was cool. But, you know, one of the problems that I kind of had with like wine culture was that there was just so much pretension to it, you know, and it's just odd to me that, you know, that people would use their choice of alcoholic beverage as sort of like a means of elevating themselves over anybody else.
I love that.
And we see that in craft beer so much too, and it's become, you know, more so, I guess, as the years have kind of unfolded, and you see that, and that's, you know, one of those things that kind of just always drove me nuts is that when, well, cool, great, you can go out and, you know, afford a bottle of like Opus One, you know, great, good for you, but you know, it's fermented grape juice.
You're enjoying it with your fellow humans, right?
Yeah.
It's just,
and it's, you know, and it's wonderful to, and I really, really appreciate like fine wine, fine beer, like high grade stuff, you know, like, you know, and
there's something to be said for quality.
But what I loved about beer was that I felt like it was something that was a little bit more appealing to everybody. Everybody drinks beer, and it seemed to be that sort of pretension was a little bit. It was a little bit less in craft beer, especially when I, you know, first started getting into it.
When was that?
So it would have been in 2008 when Hopcat first opened. So
pre-boom, really, because the boom started kind of in 2010.
Yeah. And so when I first started working there and I started bartending there, I'd gotten hired for a bartending gig there, and I came into it thinking like, I love craft beer. I know a lot about beer.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I love Belgian beer, and I thought I knew so much about beer. And then when we got in and we started doing like training, I realized like, oh, shit, I don't know anything about beer. Like I knew stuff of like I know what I like, but I didn't realize, like all these different little, traditional German beers.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know what the hell the Reinheitsgebot was, before I started at Hopcat,
Wait, what was that word? The Reinheitsgebot. In German, this word has a literal translation, as so many German words do. It's purity order. Reinheitsgebot refers to the set of regulations limiting the ingredients in beer in Germany. Introduced by Duke Wilhelm IV of Bavaria in 1516, the decree allows for only barley, hops, and water in every stein. Of course, there are some modern refinements to the purity order for brewing, including yeast.
Just knew about, like I like IPAs, so that kind of really blew my mind. And at that time, there was such an interesting and wild proliferation of craft beer, because there was, there were so many people doing such exciting things, and everything was just like, was exciting at that point, it seemed like, because new breweries were open up, they were
all
doing
the time,
different things,
sure.
And
winning in different ways too. Like some would do a stout, some would do a porter. They have these staple beers.
Yeah, and it was and it was cool because I got to see so many of these the bigger breweries in Michigan now in their younger periods when they were way smaller, and like Shorts, for instance,
Sure.
when we were some of the first accounts that were pouring Shorts beer, and I remember they'd bring them in these Hoff Stevens kegs, which we all absolutely fucking hated, but they're round kegs and they're so hard to lift, and they had a different coupler for them, and
sure,
like, oh my god, and but now like you look at them now, and I mean they're just doing such huge distribution, and they're doing insane things, and Founders was quite a bit smaller at the time, and
Bell's too.
Yeah, Bell's was still pretty large at that point, and I've seen in that time a lot of breweries really grow and flourish and do well. I've seen some sort of just kind of keep doing what they're doing, just kind of just stay where they're at, and seen newer people come in, and things kind of change a little bit. So, but yeah, it's more exciting to me though, with craft beer than it is, like for instance, back to the whole point of like wine. It's like, okay, well, you've got, when you do a wine, it's like, okay, it's one single varietal or maybe blends and whatnot, and then you ferment it and then you age it, in oak barrels or whatever. But that's just that. But it's very specific to the grape and then maybe the oak and the process. But there's not much you can do to it. There's not much additive or or modifications that you can do to it.
Sure.
It's sort of a very, I don't want to say one-dimensional. I don't want to knock on the wine too hard, but in a sense, there's not as much complexity, and it's not as multifaceted of a process.
Sure.
I'm sure somebody out there that's a winemaker is probably sighing at that, because there's probably a lot that I just don't know.
Yeah, you can look them in the camera and be like, hey, I'm on to you.
Oh, right. No. They'll probably be like, no, come up to our spot and we'll show you. Because there is,
that would be a good thing, though. I mean, it diversifies the conversation, right?
Yeah.
You would learn something, they would learn something.
Yeah. And I think a lot of wine really is actually more specific in terms of the agricultural aspect of it.
What the soil is like.
Yeah,
exactly. Like acidity and all these other things.
And I think a lot of that is, I think, probably one of the reasons I think why it has a lot of appeal to people, because there's that terroir, there's that time and place, that contemporaneous aspect of that wine representing like 2016's harvest, or 2014's harvest, and
this weather pattern, all these different things that go into it.
And you kind of see a lot.
This man's vocabulary is deep. Terroir refers to the characteristics of the environment in which food or wine is produced. We're talking influencers like regional and local climate, soil, and topography.
See a lot of some of those things mirrored in craft beer now too, with like sour beers and different types of things that people are doing, where and some of the farmhouse beers and breweries that are coming out now, they're able to kind of provide a similar thing that you see in wine, which is an interesting sort of contemporaneous take on this is this year's barley harvest, and this year's hops, and this is all stuff that came from our farm, and we're using wild yeast and things like that. So I think that we're seeing some really cool breweries starting to do stuff like that. Like Mitch at Speciation has been doing some really brilliant stuff with that, with they're taking like a cool ship out to different like lakes and gathering different yeast from different areas.
No kidding.
And that stuff is really beautiful.
That's
because
interesting.
that brings a different type of element to the whole conversation of beer, where this is very representative of like this lake or that lake, or that time and place, and I think that's one of the really awesome things that I'm starting to see people do with beer more. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. To me, it sounds like you talked about wine, you talked about the potential behind wine and sort of its place and culture as an alcoholic drink, but beer has been historically more ubiquitous. It's been kings and peasants. It's been this drink you can sit at a table with anyone and enjoy. And that's what you've embodied in your creation, right? You go back there and do the science, but the art of it is, how can we make this universally enjoyable?
That's a huge thing to us. It is a really, really big thing to us, because and a lot of times, some breweries will sort of kind of brew to what they like, which I understand, and it's great, but that's something that I think that we probably try to push as a priority for us, is to be able to make beer that, can be appreciated by a wider variety of people. Because, truth be told, there's some beers that we make that I'm not specifically keen on, like I will make them and know that they're principally like as good as they can be, but like, I don't really hang out and drink them, but
we've checked the boxes on this beer. We've done some experimentation. We know what it's like. We know it fits the flavor profile it's supposed to, but it ain't my thing.
And then but if it makes people happy, man, that's a super important thing, because I think that sometimes, I we'll see brewers over the years that kind of get wrapped up into their own sort of like tunnel vision about how things should be. And rather than think, well, hey, get your ego out of the picture and just think about, well, do people like it? Are they going to drink it? Are they going to consume it? Is it going to make, everybody happy or some people happy? And there's sometimes that we'll do beers that, like this lager, for instance, like, people will shake their head, and some of the craft brewers that I know will kind of be like,
why are you doing that?
What the fuck,
you guys are wasting a fermenter on lager.
And they'll laugh at it, but a lot of breweries also love it, so a lot of, but it's funny because sometimes when when we tell people we're brewing a light adjunct lager, they'll be like,
what's the word what's the word adjunct mean in that?
So for this, for instance, adjunct is anything that's not like malt, barley based or like grain based. So an adjunct could be anything, but basically it's like an additional ingredient that's outside of like malt, hops, water, yeast, So in this particular one, it is dextrose, like corn sugar.
Yeah, sure.
So one of the cool things about using dextrose in a beer like this is it's actually an odd technicality that I think a lot of people don't realize. Like, so when you drink light beer, it's pretty crisp. The finish on it's crisp, and there's a reason why. It's because the acidity is a little bit lower on it. So the finishing pH of light lagers is a little bit lower, so it tends to finish around 4.1, a little bit closer to 4. But when you have an all malted barley beer, what it will do in the fermentation is it will buffer that pH at about 4.2. It'll keep it from going lower. So when we use an adjunct like dextrose, it's just basically corn sugar. Dextrose is it's a simple sugar. It's easily accessible to the yeast, but there's not as much buffering in the actual fermenting wort. So the pH can get a little bit lower, and then that makes the finished beer a little bit crisper. Interesting. Yeah, so that's one of the main reasons why we use an adjunct like dextrose in a beer like that, is because we wanted to have that clean, sort of classic light lager finish.
You're aiming for a specific pH.
Yeah, and also too, because the dextrose is stripped down, there's really nothing to it. There's no flavor to it. It's just sugar. So in that aspect too, we're also able to just provide a really, really stripped down beer. And people are like, it doesn't taste like anything. It tastes like water. It'd be like, thank you. That's the point.
Yeah, that's kind of the point. It's interesting because it clearly doesn't taste like water.
Right.
Like but I think that's sort of the cultural theme. Like people think of Miller Lite, and then what they say is it tastes like water, Coors Light, whatever.
Because we get tired of thinking about beer sometimes, and obviously we think about this one, so I mean that kind of throws it out. But
I mean, you say you get tired of thinking about it, right? But you go through the process, like you actually work through the process,
right?
And you get to the end point, and you're like, now I'm good.
So when we sit and drink, and it's stripped down.
It's just good, yeah. How about we grab some food?
Yeah,
you up
sure.
for that? All right,
yeah, yeah.
So we ordered the Buffalo cauliflower. Yeah. I'm super stoked about that. So you started to detail a lot of the science behind brewing. Like we heard about the length of fermentation. We heard about the use of dextrose in the process to limit pH. Like there's a lot of science that goes into brewing. Your background, and forgive me if my research is wrong though, is in organic chem and microbial.
Yeah, kind of, yeah, more or less. So my degree is in genomics and molecular genetics. I have to pay a lot of money every month.
Where's your lab coat?
I paid a lot of money in student loans every month, so I might as well get my dollars worth out of saying the full name. It sounds pretty badass.
Genomics and molecular genetics. All right.
Yeah. So with that course load, I took a lot of microbiology classes, a lot of organic chem classes.
Which is this? I mean, that is this.
Yeah, a lot of biochem classes. Yeah. So I mean, a lot of exactly. Everything about the brewing process is basically utilizing a lot of that science. I mean, 100% really what it is, you know, and
you're taking live species of some things, you're taking dead species of other things, you're combining those, letting them go through chemical change, then ultimately monitoring those chemical changes until they reach a certain level of solution, and then you're combining those with yet other things that react.
It's pretty wild, yeah. It's fun to do because, you know, I think a lot of that education, I mean, some of it's a bit overkill because, you know, when we learn about like enzyme kinetics, for instance, and like biochem, if you look at what's going on in a mash, where we're steeping all the grains at a specific temperature, a specific pH, and everything like that. I mean, everything that's going on in there, it's all enzyme kinetics. We're manipulating, you know, the way that those enzymes react in that particular environment, and
through heat and pressure and that sort of thing.
Well, heat and pH, and then also concentration of different things, like you know the substrate solvent concentration and things like that. So, and it's pretty wild because, you know, when you look at it from much more of a biochem perspective, you know, those parameters, the clarity on those things is a little bit different than when, for instance, you know, somebody just tells you, okay, we'll mash at 154 if you want
for a set period of time.
Yeah, and you'll get a little bit of a sweeter beer, or, you know, a little bit more body, and you're just like, okay, cool, sounds great. But, you know, if you start looking at the different activity of like alpha and beta amylase at different temperature ranges and different pHs, and, you know, the way they chop up the different sugars, you know, in those different temperature ranges and pHs, then you realize like, okay, well, you understand why more rather than just like, okay, this is what you should do. But, you know, I'm always one of those people that always wants to know, well, why?
The next why, right? The reason for doing something.
Yeah, and you know,
and then how it works.
Yeah, and you can obviously dig yourself in a real rabbit hole and you start getting like really crazy. But, you know, it's still you know, nice to know that at a you know, a molecular level, at a chemistry level, exactly why that stuff is happening, rather than just be like, well, I read it in a book, I'm gonna do that, you know,
or I read it in a simple set of instructions that came with my brewery kit,
right?
And I'm gonna boil it on my stove, and well, 154 kind of looks like 158, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
like you guys are doing things with much more specificity here.
Yeah, and
you have the capability to measure.
Yeah, and understanding why those things happen, and the little fine details of all that kind of stuff at all, you know, different stages in the process. You know, if we understand why, then we can also manipulate and change things and tweak it.
And it allows you to troubleshoot, right?
Yeah, and that too, that allows us to troubleshoot. And also when we're modifying different parameters, you know, understanding the whys and all the fine details make it a lot more science and logic based. And, you know, so when we're making tweaks, you know, we can be a lot more informed about it rather than just kind of pissing in the wind and being like, well, let's hope it works out.
I assume as a tinkerer, I mean, a lot of times you're going by gut, but it's informed, right? Like you have a deep set of knowledge around the variables, and you're tinkering, but based on gut. But it's because you know so many of the details.
Yeah, we try to.
or you may fucking not. It just might not work.
Yeah, well, you know, that's the wild thing.
That's part of the fun.
Yeah, and there's a lot of variables. But when we do brew, we keep track of a lot of statistics that all the ones that we can modify. So we'll try to keep as good of notes as we can on certain beers. Every now and then we'll be like, shit, we didn't write that down. But when it's a new beer and it's a beer that we are really, really set on tinkering with and that we really want to change, we definitely make a very good effort to take good notes on it. So
that's good.
But yeah, it's informed tinkering.
Informed tinkering. I like that. So are there any beers that you do variations of? Because, Dragon's Milk has variations. Now KBS is going to have variations coming up here. Are there some bases that you spend time tinkering with alternatives for?
Yeah. One that we do, which I think we were talking about maybe earlier with the wild names. So Universal Rainbow Unicorn Princess of the Universe and stuff.
And stuff. I love the and stuff.
It's because if we don't throw that on there, the redundancy seems like a typo,
like an accident.
No, we purposely are being extremely redundant.
It reminds me of the store Food and Stuff in Parks and Rec. I don't know if you know the show.
Oh, yeah.
It's just called Food and Stuff.
Yeah.
You
can get
just
everything
all
there.
of the stuff and stuff.
Sounds like my kind of store. So that one we've done a lot of variations on. So most of the time, it's generically kind of considered part of the Princess Unicorn series, and a lot of it, is stuff that we just have fun with, just being a little bit more whimsical on the ingredients and the sort of the different manifestations of that beer over time. So we'll use a specific base beer. In a specific base beer and process that we just basically will kettle sour, a very simple base beer, and then we will take different fruits, spices, herbs, things like that, and kind of just dress it up a little bit differently, especially seasonally too,
Sure.
And that one's really fun because, it's just the base itself is a really fun beer. It's just a stripped down soured wheat beer. There's not a whole lot to it. So even the base beer itself is fun. And we already know that one's solid. So, we have fun changing it up depending on if it's summer or if it's winter, when winter came along, and it got a little bit colder, we kind of changed it up a little bit. We did one with blackberry and rosemary.
Okay.
We'll do stuff with we done it with blood orange and mint before. And the most recent one, the Universal Rainbow Unicorn Princess of the Universe and stuff.
You don't make it easy, man.
I know. So that one is actually a fun merging of another beer that we did called Rainbow Universe.
Oh, I know Rainbow Universe.
Yeah, so we had been wanting to merge the two for a long time, and we just kept talking about it, but some other weird idea would kind of come up, and then we finally were like, okay, let's merge those two together, and that's how we got that beer, which has that crazy ass redundant name.
Sure.
But so that one is a fun base beer that we've taken and we've done a lot of interesting manipulations with over time and had so much fun with it because now people recognize, they see the Princess Unicorn.
They see it on the menu, that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, well, so the one now is raspberry, blueberry, and lemon zest. So Rainbow Universe is just a regular pale ale.
Yeah.
Super simple, and then we've always just done that with raspberry, blueberry, and lemon zest. And then this time we just took those ingredients, the fruit and the lemon. Well, lemon is a fruit. Anyways.
Yeah.
We took those and threw it on the base for Unicorn, our Princess Unicorn. So that's the most recent one. And then that one will probably be around until fall really rolls in. And then we'll get a little more fall-ish with it. But
Currant or something like that. Who knows?
Yeah. Make a Thanksgiving stuffing one.
I'm in for that.
That'd be so gross.
I don't know. I mean, as long as it's not weirdly thick like gravy.
Yeah.
As long as it keeps the texture, I think you can do some.
I mean, we're in West Michigan. People might be into carbonated gravy. I don't know.
Just make it gravy thickness.
It's cold enough, man.
Pour it down your gullet. That's fun. So you talked about kettle souring.
Yeah.
Let's hit on that process real quick because you used it as a phrase that you're used to, but I'm not sure everybody knows what it means.
Right, for sure. So a lot of times sour beers will be aged in oak barrels, and then the fermentation and the process for it to become sour usually is a little bit more lengthy because the environment that you're putting those microbes in and the yeast in is going to be one that's going to require a little bit more time for them to be able to do those kind of processes.
Yeah.
But with kettle souring is what we're basically doing is we're doing a normal mash, like a normal beer,
Yep.
we're running off all that wort into the kettle and like any other normal beer. But for this one, we only boil it just long enough just to bring some sterilization to it. You know, we'll boil it for 10 minutes and then we'll transfer it. Some people, we call it kettle souring, but for us, we don't actually sour it in the kettle.
Okay.
We have a lot of drafts that come back through ours because our stack goes right outside. So
Gotcha.
we will just run it into a fermenter,
Okay.
and then we will pitch a culture of lactobacillus in it. So lactobacillus, most people are commonly familiar with as being the thing that makes yogurt tangy.
Yep.
So we'll pitch some of those microbes into there and pitch them at about 100 degrees ish, you know, and flush out all the oxygen in there because lactobacillus does not like oxygen. It'll tolerate it, but it'll sour quickly if you strip the oxygen out. And it'll sour, you know, usually 24 hours if we do it right, or if the microbes are happy.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll take a couple days. In any event, what's happening is that lactobacillus will acidify that wort, and it'll bring it down from a pH. We'll start at 4.5.
Yep.
So we actually we'll bring down that pH from 5.2, which is generally our finished pH when we're done boiling, about 5.2. We'll drop that pH with lactic acid down to 4.5.
Okay.
And there's a couple of reasons for that, but one of which is a very technical one. But what will generally happen is if you don't acidify that to 4.5, the lactobacillus will kind of be forced to scavenge and do different things that it needs to do to acidify.
Right.
And
Science break. Lactobacillus is a lactic acid bacteria, otherwise known as an LAB, which produces acidity and sour flavors in the form of lactic acid. As Ernie mentioned, one strategy to minimize the negative effects of protein scavenging by lactobacillus is to lower the pH of the wort to around 4.5. At that pH, the protein-degrading enzymes drop off significantly, but the growth of lactobacillus is not inhibited by the acidity. Thus, you can successfully sour the beer.
Scavenge proteins, and it'll kind of thin out the body and destroy the head retention of the beer a little bit.
Yeah, interesting.
So, and also too, because it's an acidophile, which means that it just loves acid. You know, so it's like that Greek or Latin. I think it's Greek acidophile. Anyways, bringing it down to 4.5 also brings it into a range where it can actually work.
Yep.
It will work at 5.2, but it takes a minute, you know, and it's kind of bridging a gap for it and kind of helping it along. Yep. So we'll drop it down to 4.5 to help it along, keep it from scavenging proteins that will affect the beer and affect the head retention, and then we'll let it sour, and it'll bring it down from 4.5 to usually we'll stop at about 3.4, 3.5. Depending on what the beer that we're going to do with it is.
So that low. So previously you talked about with the lager, 4.2, 4.1 was kind of your goal.
Yeah, 4.2 is generally finishing for like a standard premium lager.
But in this case, your sours go lower, 3.5, 3.
Yep. So 3.5 is one that usually we'll settle for 3.5. If, for instance, we're using something like quite a bit more sweet, we can go a little bit lower. If we're going to add like some fruit to it at the tail end of the fermentation, that's going to, you know, leave a little bit more sweetness, we'll go a little lower. If it's something that's a little bit more of a dry fruit or like a citrus fruit or something like that, doesn't carry the same kind of weight with sweetness or also carries its own sourness, we'll kind of leave it a little bit higher.
Okay.
So we change it and accommodate depending on what we're going to do to it in the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it'll rock out for, you know, about 24, 36 hours, and we monitor the pH, and once it hits that right number, we'll push it back into the kettle.
Okay.
And then we'll boil it again.
Yep.
Like a normal beer, any other normal beer, we'll boil it for, you know, an hour. We'll add hops to it at that point. We don't add hops to it before we put the microbes in because the microbes hate hops. That's actually one of the old purposes of hops, one of the old benefits of hops.
Was to shut down the microbe production?
Yeah, they do not like it. Yeah. Lactobacillus being one that really has a hard time with like any amount of hops. Some other microbes can tolerate it a little bit better, but Lactobacillus, if you throw it in wort that's like 15 IBUs, they'll be like,
Does it just not proceed with its chemical processes?
Well,
does it die off?
Well, there's some things about it that are sort of antimicrobial, so it'll interfere with their it'll interfere with something metabolic in terms of their proliferation. It just kind of like shuts them down. So it's something about the different types of acids in the hops themselves, the different types of like oils and whatnot in it. So
interesting.
It just says, nah, don't want to do it. So, but then we'll hop it, and then we'll pitch a yeast into it, and we'll run it like a normal beer, like any other normal beer that we would do.
Because it's already soured at that point, and you can run it through. That's awesome.
So basically, though, the fun thing about that is that versus souring in a barrel, what we're doing is we're taking the parameters that really, really make that lactobacillus happy, and we're temperature, pH, all those things, and we're providing the ideal environment for them to be able to do their work and to sour it. Removed from the barreling process, removed from like what would ordinarily be, if we do a normal sour beer, we'll run the IBUs low, and we'll also, but we're pitching everything kind of together.
Yep.
And so there's competition going on. You're moving into a barrel, the temperature is going to be lower, the ambient temperature is going to be lower.
Yep.
And all those things that are going on in a barrel don't provide the ideal environment for those specific microbes that are souring to work, as well as if we just run it into a fermenter with just that. Nobody else, nobody's competing with it. No hops, nothing, just 100 degrees. It's nice and warm and cozy, and then it just gets out and does its work. And then it brings us the sourness that we want much more quickly and uninhibited than if, for instance, we throw it into a barrel. But, there's a lot of different complexities that come from barrel aging, but that's, it's a whole other rabbit hole.
You guys do a little bit of barrel aging. I've seen the barrels downstairs. Yeah. What are your top barrel aged beers?
Well, one we've been doing that we really, really love, and we've just been kind of keeping rolling, is this one that we call Sur la Lune, which means like on the moon in French.
Sur la Lune.
Yeah, so that one is a pretty stripped down, just golden wheat ale. But we've kind of developed a little bit of a house yeast blend that's got, it's yeast and microbes that we've kind of just added things to over the years. And we have it in one specific tank, and there's just a whole bunch of oak chips in the bottom of this tank. And they just rock out, and so we'll run beer into it, really, really weak, super chill beer. Like the one that we use sort of just to hold things like a placeholder is this one that we call Petite Chouette. Super stripped down beer. There's not a whole lot to it. It's about 10 IBUs. It's the beginning gravity of it's like a lager. It's so stripped down, and what we'll do is we'll drain that down when that gets sour enough, and then we'll run it in the bright tank, we'll keg it, et cetera, et cetera. But then but the oak chips will kind of hold on to everything in the bottom. So there's just a whole bunch of oak chips there.
Yep.
And so what we'll do is we'll brew another batch into it and kind of refill that back up, and then it'll get going again, and it'll chug along. And when we're starting new barrels too, a lot of times we'll also pull some from that holding tank and start our new barrels with it too. But
keeping that kind of custom yeast profile that you've developed over time.
Yeah, but it changes a lot too. It'll change over time. I mean, I'm sure there'll be a point to which it'll probably be like,
we're not going to use this anymore. Maybe it'll redevelop it.
Yeah, maybe it'll just be infinite. I mean, people have been able to reuse the same barrels for so many years in like sour beer. There's like a legendary barrel that had kind of bounced around from like New Belgium to like Rare Barrel and a couple of these other places. That,
no kidding.
I think that recently there was a project that this guy, Peter Bluchert, had done. Originally, he started a new brewery now, and I think that they might have given him the barrel. I'd seen an interesting post from the guys at Falling Rock Tap House in Denver, and they were premiering this beer that he'd done with this barrel. I forget what they call it. There's a name. They have a name for this barrel. Like it's like ultra legendary. So I think he has it now. But that was a barrel that had provided the base culture for a lot of the sour beers for New Belgium. Also, I think Rare Barrel that's out of California. So, I mean, a lot of those people are able to sort of maintain those cultures out of a barrel and then use them and sort of spike new barrels and sort of proliferate that blend. But it's still like, it's always going to change on its own. It's always going to.
That makes sense.
But, what were we back to? So, so the mother culture, it'll change a little bit, but for now, it's doing really good. So, Sur la Lune is basically started off of that. All of other sours we might start them with different yeast here and there, you know, but that's one of our favorite ones.
It seems, so sours as a whole have become more trendy over the last 3-4 years.
Yeah, definitely.
Is it something that, when you're developing your next beer, do you consider the class of sours as a whole, like we're going to sour this is the process, or do you look for a particular flavor profile and then say, it requires souring to achieve this?
Oh, what we usually do is with that, it's kind of tricky because what if we do have some beers that we have had going, and we'll start barrels off, and we might start with a fresh barrel, French oak barrel, and when we first started some of the sours here, we kind of set out with just the intention of making sour beer rather than like taking a recipe and thinking like, okay, that would be really good sour.
Yeah.
We build the recipe more around the idea that we're going to sour.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll change some little things about the process on the front end in terms of how we brew it.
Yeah.
The ingredients that we choose, the amount of hops that we'll use in it, with the idea that we're gonna put it into barrels and we're gonna sour it. So
nice.
Yeah. So that approach is we've definitely set out to sour things.
You're going to sour this for sure. And then you're going to decide on sort of the overall profile as you go through develop the souring process.
Yeah. And it's a little, the front end process is a little bit different. We do slightly different things in terms of our ingredients and the way that we'll mash beer, temperatures that we use, and whatnot, and the amount of hops that we use. Definitely tailored to the idea that it's going to be soured.
That it's going to be soured.
So it's a different process, but it's weird because it's like making sour beer is one of those things that there's a different kind of elegance to it and a different kind of fun in that. Like, you only have so much control.
Yeah.
Once you put it in the barrel, there's not much you can do to it, and you can only really accommodate sort of the foundation for, how you brew that beer and what you do to it on the front end. We kind of sort of tailor that process to what we think is going to work best for the microbes in there, what's going to make the yeast happy, and things like that, because some of these things will ferment and kind of metabolize over a way different timeline,
Yeah, sure.
So with these beers that we rock out here, it's front to back in like 2 weeks for most of our regular beers.
Yeah.
Obviously a little longer for lagers, but
what about sours?
Yeah, sours. So they can take over a year sometimes. Wow. They can sometimes we'll get cultures that really, really rock. And, there's been some that we've been really happy with after like 4 or 5 months, 6 months. But it depends because there's some things that will shift a little bit. And there have been times where we've had beers that'll sour really, really quickly. But then we weren't experiencing as much of the Brett yeast character on it, So we realized that we started changing some of the IBUs that we're using in it and kind of sort of adjusting it. So it kind of stifled the bacteria a little bit.
Intentionally
slow the souring,
limit the souring,
and then
give it more flavor profiles of what it's basically aging in, right?
Yeah, and so we were wanting to see a little bit more Brett character out of some of the barrels. Brett's a different kind of yeast. It's like people classify it as a wild yeast or whatever, but it's the enemy of winemakers. They absolutely fucking hate it. And with good reason, because if it gets into
it changes their flavor profile, whatever they're fermenting.
Yeah, it can completely obliterate a vineyard's stock.
And it can skunk a bottle. Like it can do a lot of different things because it's coated on the grape or whatever.
Yeah. So these poor folks out in the wine industry, that's their bane. So we'll adjust things a little bit just to kind of keep them eaten for a while, and to keep them developing a little bit more complexity. So we've had fun kind of changing the way we approach things in order to kind of accommodate all that and help along a different kind of a complexity. So
I didn't know much about souring going into this, so I really appreciate the detail on this.
I love making them, and it's there's just so much of a different kind of elegance to the process because you're sort of like trusting to this. Natural processes of things that you have to let go of some control when you make them that you can only modify so much, but after that you just have to be like, well, friends, do your thing,
This is what it's going to be.
And that's goes back to another thing about, the whole time and place thing, being representative of like, of some of the barrels that we use from batch to batch. They even will taste a little bit different because some of those cultures will shift over time, and some things will, become more prolific, and some things will fade a little bit. So
to me, it's sort of the elemental nature of what you're dealing with, right? There's an unpredictability with grapes and what the weather's going to be, what the soil's going to be like, what your runoff's going to be, all these different things, which you can try to control for, but you really can't. Right. And you're dealing with the live system as well, right? Yeah. What's attached to the inside of the barrel, what multiplied more than the other thing,
for sure.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's that stuff is to me, it's so, like super fun in a way different way though, because it's
you're managing life.
Yeah, you're just letting these things kind of run,
Yeah.
and there's just so much interesting like elegance and beauty to just a lot of these microbial dynamics, the way these populations shift and they change, and that's nature. You know, that's some of the wonderful
chaos.
Right, it is. And it's chaos, but it's so oddly organized in a different way that a different kind of scale that know it's wild to see sometimes the different nuances that come out and in some of these sour beers and that's why that sometimes people kind of get put off by them or they don't understand them and that's fine, but once you begin to understand the process more is when I think that to me it became more fascinating.
That's exactly the word I was going to use. I was going to say the whole process is fascinating because it's dynamic, it's interesting, it's different. You're not going to get the same, you could put in the same variables into the equation and just like the literal chaos theory, like fractal patterns, you're going to get something out the other side.
Yeah, and it's because all the crazy math behind it and all those types of proliferation of microbial populations, it's just like little things, tiny little things just change a little bit, and then it inspires a completely different spiraling of all these dynamics and
that butterfly effect, right? Like the butterfly flaps its wings in LA and you get different weather in Peking, right?
Yeah, that's the crazy, wild, beautiful shit that's going on in just everyday life, and that to me is one of the most wild things about biology. That's actually a huge part of why I love genetics, is because really when you think about it, what the hell is a genome?
Yeah, sure.
4 molecules repeating.
Yeah, that's true. Repeating.
And then
in some weird sequence.
Yeah. And then you look at us, we're 3 billion base pairs of DNA, and it's like, then you look how crazy complex all that stuff is, and it's like, but it's just tiny little things, it's just little bits of, tiny little molecular stuff. But then when those things repeat and when they magnify or when they, and they go through all these processes, you end up getting these wildly complex and beautiful things that
different from one another.
Yeah.
Despite sharing 95% of their genetics.
Yeah.
We share something like some ridiculous 90 something with dogs, with fungus, with all these different things.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah, fungi are pretty close. We share a lot of genes with fungi, which is wild. It's
kind of crazy.
Like, mushroom, you ain't nothing like me. Actually, sir, I am quite a bit like you.
I grow underground. No.
Yeah.
I don't know. How about we try the buffalo cauliflower?
You want to do that? Let's rock out.
All right, sweet.
I'm gonna go. Let's grab some more beer.
Let's grab more beer too. Yeah.
All right.
What do we got? What kind of beer?
So we were talking about sour beer.
I was hoping.
I mean, we have to, because we need a little bit of closure on this.
Absolutely.
Not closure, but what would you call it?
Representation.
Yeah, representation. A little bit of legitimization of the conversation.
Yes,
the rabbit hole we've gone down.
It's practicality, right? We talked in theory. This is practicality.
Yeah, we can't just keep talking about something and just not actually really taste it. So this is Sur La Lune, actually, what we were just talking about.
Okay,
And this is a beer that we love quite a bit. We've done some variations on it, but this one is just the stripped down base. There's no fruit or anything like that. It's just, and we generally keep this one. We don't really mess with this one too much.
Yeah.
We did one with blueberries recently. Recently, at least a year ago. I'm old. Time's flying.
I mean,
that whole relativity thing.
That's universally recent, right?
I'm not that old. I'm 41. I'm fine.
Yeah. Let's do this. Let's try it.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. That's good. That's clean. Oh my God. I want some more.
Yeah, that's a fun one because at least for us, I like it because it's not intensely sour. It's a little bit more chill, a little bit more accessible, but it's got some fun, interesting expression of the yeast to it. It's got a nice sourness, but it's not like.
Should we do the wine tasting thing? We're I sense a little pear and a little apple.
You could if you want,
I smell the rubber of the road in front.
Dude, I would love. Yeah, if you could taste the rubber of the road on that one, I'd be pretty damn impressed.
It's really good. It's not super sour.
Yeah.
It's not that make your face pucker type sour.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, like, you know, we do on occasion make like really, really sour beer. It's not necessarily by choice. Sometimes, like we were saying, the microbes just do their thing.
Yeah.
But this one is nice because it's a little bit more approachable. And, you know, for people that might not necessarily be super into sour beer, it's just a nice beer that can kind of bridge that gap. You know, there's some nice, like, familiar, like fruitiness to it. You get a lot of, like, you know, apricot, peach, things like that to it that are nice. But cauliflower is not usually my thing, but I'm gonna rock it out. My wife loves this cauliflower.
Really?
Yeah.
She's gonna watch you try this and be like, "What?"
Yeah.
You are definitely having cauliflower for the next like 3 weeks.
But I mean, you know, you put some buffalo sauce on it and some blue cheese. I mean, you can't really be mad at it.
Mm-mm.
That idea that vegetables are somehow inferior to fruits or meats is dead. Instead, we want our vegetables and we want them bold. A good buffalo cauliflower is a classic of balance and purity, delicious without being extravagant. GRBC's is served steaming hot. They're tender with an understated kick from the buffalo sauce. Blue cheese adds a tangy richness, and a shredded crudité provides an occasional and ideal crispness. Yeah, these are the vegetables we want.
These are good.
If you're gonna bring me cauliflower and it's like that, I'll be cool.
Go ahead. Have a little more.
We're sassy. They got a little sass to them too.
So, you have custom screen printed artwork that provides the labels for your bottles. You guys have eclectic names that for your beers, like the Unicorn Princess and stuff. But say the whole name.
Universal Rainbow Unicorn Princess of the Universe.
Yes, yeah. So that's an enormous amount of personality that you bring to the GRBC brand, and
I think so.
I want to know, like, how and why that happens. Is that you, because you also have an assistant in Bobby that you're very close with, like there's a kinship there.
Yeah.
And GRBC has this culture every time, you know, from the wood atmosphere to the gaming room, etc., where it's just a fun place to be.
Yeah. We hope so, you know. So Bobby and I used to work together at Hopcat for a long time. So he's had the unique privilege of working with me for that long. No, I love him to death, man. He is like my brother, you know, and
there's magic there.
Yeah, you know, man, he's a guy that he's not really an assistant. He's probably more aptly titled the head brewer because he does most of the brewing and like a lot of logistics on the front end.
I'm gonna take back what I said. Head brewer Bobby Edgecombe.
Yeah, he does the vast majority of the brewing on the front end of things, and I'm usually the guy that I guide the process and kind of look at parameters. And, you know, I'd almost be more like the head cellarman, director of operations.
Head cellarman. Yeah. You actually need a name like your beer, like head cellarman, alchemist, unicorn princess.
I think on my business card it just says Brewhouse Alchemist.
Yeah, I like that. But Bobby's your other guy. That's a part of the brew room culture.
Yeah. I mean, he's the dude that makes shit happen.
Yeah.
I'm the guy that comes up with crazy ass ideas and, you know, guide processes, and he's the guy that's like, dude, that's messed up. Like, we can't do that. And I'm like, wait,
he's a bit of a
But, you know, he brings things back down to planet Earth sometimes when they need to be brought back to planet Earth. But yeah, so we've worked together for a long time,
that's awesome.
And we have a lot of fun with a lot of the same kind of things. But so a lot of this stuff is kind of a collaboration, you know, between he and I, and we'll sit around and think about names and bat it around and laugh about it, and sometimes we might not necessarily agree on a name. Sometimes we'll be like, yeah, that's fucking stupid, and I'll be like, but no, it's funny. And be like,
it's funny right now.
Yeah.
It might not be funny.
Yeah, and then, you know, the other guys that work here, Todd and Joel and Corey and all those guys, they're our management staff, and Abby.
Yeah.
You know, they all, I mean, sometimes they'll be like, dude, no, don't do that. Don't call it that. But, you know, but we have a lot of fun with a lot of this stuff, so.
It seems like it's a group effort. Like, it seems like, you know, obviously you have your space in the brewery. Like it's become yours and it's become Bobby's.
Yeah.
But it does seem to be more almost a family approach to what you guys are doing here. Like the front of house has some influence over back of house and vice versa.
And also too, the guys that do the graphics for us. You know, one of our previous graphic designers that was in that department, Kyle is a good friend of mine, Kyle DeGroff. He's no longer with us. He's doing freelance stuff, and
he's not dead, is he?
No.
You said no longer with us. I was.
He's very much alive.
Okay,
he's very much alive. He is flourishing, and he's doing wonderfully.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Love you, Kyle. You're alive.
Sorry, Kyle. Misinterpreted.
And then Elliot Shaltry is now he's the head of our creative department, and so he and I are super good friends. I mean, like. This time last year we were in Europe together. He and his husband and my wife and I were all in Europe together. So
nice.
You know, we keep a really good relationship, and those guys do awesome work. So it's fun to have those guys close with us because you know when we have fun ideas, you know they see things from a different angle, not as isolated. You know, for instance, obviously we have to keep things kind of in a little bit of a brand focused kind of ideology, but. Yeah, it's fun because, you know, we can take those ideas to them and they know, you know, exactly kind of what kind of weird shit's going on in my head and in the rest of our heads. It kind of, bring some fun graphics with it. So
your brand is, I mean, this is a weird phrase, but it's reasonably eclectic, right? Like there is, you know, in the way you name your beers and what you do for your labels and how you interact with the community. Yeah. But it's all within reason, right? You're doing good work.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's some times that like I wanted to be a lot more weird, but I
just didn't work out.
But you know, that's just me.
Yeah,
it's just like one of those things that like you know I can't force everything to change around me just because of the way that I want to do shit.
Sure, that's true.
I can try to affect it, you know, and so we stay in our lane a little bit, you know, and we know, but you know they're. You know, it's a beautiful thing because I've been a part of this company for a long time. So in general, you know, they allow a fair amount of trust to a lot of the stuff that we do. Whereas maybe if I hadn't been around for that long, they'd be like,
sure,
nah, not gonna do that.
Not gonna happen.
Yeah.
We talked about. I love the phrase "down to a science" and "raised to an art." Like I love the contradiction of those phrases.
Yeah.
We talked about the science of brewing a lot.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about the artistic side of it. We talked a little bit about the chaos side of it, which is also mappable via math, but we won't get into that right now.
For sure.
I want to know a little bit more about the art of it because, I mean, there's a culture around craft beer where you have people that will travel for a beer release 1,000 miles.
Those people are nuts.
They will try. I mean, I have friends who on Untapped have logged thousands of beers, 1,000 plus different beers. But this culture is pervasive in craft and micro.
Yeah.
Do you guys interact with it? Do you feel it? Are you one of them?
Yeah, that's the thing that I've had a lot of. I have opinions about that one. You know, like things like Untapped. You know, things like that. Like, and. To be completely honest, that shit makes me bristle.
Yeah.
I love the ability for people to be able to share, for instance, the idea that, okay, I tried this beer is good, I had a good time brewing or drinking this beer.
It was part of the experience.
But I think that there's also a different aspect of that culture that I fucking loathe. It drives me insane because when you see people come into the brewery and they'll take a picture, they'll have a sample flight.
Oh yeah.
1.5 ounce samples of a beer.
Yep. And
they'll rate the beer and it's like, do you really fucking know what that beer tasted like if you drank 1.5 ounces of it? Probably not. You know, and I'll be like, okay, so, but they're just ticking. Yeah. That's not really my issue is not that necessarily that they're rating the beer on 1.5 ounces, but I feel like sometimes people are like into this getting badges and all that stuff. Yeah. So it's sort of like
the gamification that bothers you more than the actual experience.
Yeah, and what it ends up doing is it kind of like it distracts from the actual the beauty of hanging out with people and drinking beer because you know, back to the point that you were talking about earlier, you know, when you create a beverage and something that's supposed to like bridge gaps and create community.
Yep.
And hang out, and people hang out, and and for me, the removal of pretension is a huge part of why I love craft beer.
I'm glad you used the phrase "create community."
Yeah.
I didn't say it as elegantly as that, but that's really what it is.
Right.
Because it's that phrase is ambiguous. It can be someone who's pretentious or someone who's not, but it's a community that's being created by craft beer.
Yeah, and you know,
continue your point. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that point, that's a critical phrase.
But then, you know, you'll see people that are, you know, sitting at a bar and their face is buried in their fucking cell phone and they are ticking away beers, but like
an ounce and a half.
Yeah, but it's like, but are you really thinking about it? Do you really even give a shit about that beer? Do you really even give a shit about that beer beyond the fact that you're checking that in and you're getting a fucking badge for it?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then even still, furthermore, you're not actually talking to the people that you're hanging out with. You're fucking around on your phone.
Yeah.
And you're tick, 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 tick. Like somebody really gives a shit what you think on the internet.
Yeah.
Maybe they do. I don't know.
I've brought this up in a couple of interviews, but it's an important point. We don't turn on YouTube comments.
Yeah.
Not because we want to like shut off the voices of the community. We want to talk to the community.
Right.
But the anonymity that comes with commenting on YouTube just it causes and fuels trolls and like that negative culture.
Yeah.
Like this is positive culture.
Yeah.
But that shit to me is like I don't want to fucking talk to you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And because of that, you know, and that's the thing is that, you know, that anonymity of being able to provide that level of critical feedback and that sort of soapbox that gives to people in an anonymous context, I think allows people to really, it brings out sometimes some of like the little bit more trashy aspects of human nature, you know, because
that's a great point.
You don't have as much liability for it because another thing.
There's no risk.
Yeah.
What's your risk?
Yeah. And back to the whole aspect of community, it's because you're participating in a very anonymous global community of things, which isn't really a community, it's just a space.
Yeah.
You know, a space that exists.
It's a connected space.
Yeah.
But it's a space.
Yeah, but it's like, you know, it's not the same as if you're in, you know, the village tavern in a small town and you didn't like a beer and you're just like, yeah, fuck this beer, it tastes like shit, and be like, well, I'm going to tell Bill that made it that you didn't like it, that you were talking shit about it. I'd be like, fuck, I probably shouldn't have said that, because I'm going to see Bill tomorrow and I don't want Bill to yell at me.
Right. I want to be honest with Bill, but I don't want to be an asshole to Bill.
Right. But you know, in the whole anonymity of the internet, people will just go and they'll say whatever the hell they want, and they might even just be drunk and had a bad experience with you know, server or bartender or whatever.
They could be having a bad day.
Yeah, and then they'll shit all over something.
Bus, yeah, whatever.
You know, and so we see that a lot of that stuff, and it
in Untapped. Do you see that culture?
Yeah, Untapped
really.
Specifically, yeah, and because I don't read it as often as I used to, and most brewers will tell you that like don't read Untapped, like just don't, because you'll want to pull your fucking hair out, you know, and. Because it'll drive you nuts, and a lot of times we'll read Untapped because, you know, there are some people that are wonderful beacons of hope out there in the cyberspace,
of course,
that will actually give really good legitimate feedback, and and that's one thing that I find super invaluable, because I would hope that people, if they have that space and they have that time and that opportunity, that they would at least provide meaningful feedback. And some people do. Yeah. So I guess I shouldn't entirely trash Untapped and forums like that.
It's not a matter of trashing Untapped, right? It is a matter of wisely using your time to seek feedback.
Right.
And when you're seeking feedback through purely anonymous channels, it's probably not as efficient as actually talking to people at the bar who can give you immediate feedback on your beer.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that those people, you know, there's this thing where if a server comes up or a manager comes up to a table, they say, how's your meal? People do this, oh, it's fine, it's amazing thing.
Yeah.
You don't want that. Right. But you do want to have an honest conversation, and you want to start out kind of with like, tell me what you hate.
Yeah.
Like that's a legitimate conversation though.
Yeah, because man, that's one thing that I do actually really value. And I do love when people can be absolutely fucking brutal and straightforward about things, because you know, especially beer, because if you've got like a point of criticism that's legitimate, and you know, and you're not just pulling it out of your ass just to be like, well, I didn't like it, like, well, that doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
But if you know, and one of the things I think is great about our Brewers Guild Fest is that, you know, when we're pouring and serving beer there, we have a really, really good, it's a wonderful privilege to be able to actually directly interact with the people that are consuming the beer right there, face to face. And our Brewers Guild events are wonderful because of that, because I think we're dealing with like a demographic that's a little bit more informed and also a little bit more tactful and also appreciative and respectful. So when we go to our Brewers Guild Fest, when we're pouring beer, you know, and we'll talk to people and we'll chat, and a lot of them are our peers, our colleagues in the industry, and you know, and we'll sit around and we'll talk shop, and you know, and those are some of the most invaluable forums, I guess, for getting feedback, and we love them because
that's interesting.
You know, they're super fun, and man, we've had such great conversations at our Brewers Guild Fest, and that's great. So I mean, got to shout out to the Michigan Brewers Guild because they do an amazing job, and there you go. They're awesome. They're awesome.
You can look at that camera there.
Thank you guys for working so hard because I love you guys.